Hi you guys, and welcome back to Life with Lene. Today I am in a new location with a new perspective on life, talking about grief and dealing with grief as a healthcare worker, and as also someone who's been through a lot of loss recently with my family. So if you're interested, let's just talk about it. Welcome back to Life with Lene. Today we're going to be talking about grief. As healthcare workers, we deal with a lot of loss, and especially if you have been working as a healthcare worker the last 1 to 2 years. So I just want to talk a little bit about grief and dealing with grief, and so let's just jump into it. So first and foremost, I think that it's important to address the fact that as healthcare professionals and healthcare workers, we deal with a lot of loss. I think my previous career in the military, when I worked in healthcare, I wasn't as close to it just because of my job. We did deal with a lot of loss, a lot of like random freak accidents and things like that happened when I was on one of my assignments, but not dealing with it as closely as I have as a nurse. So as nurses, we see and deal with loss a lot more because we are closer to our patients than anyone else who's in that hospital setting. We work very closely with these patients. We are there with them for 8, 10, 12-hour shifts. We are involved in the inner workings of their life, and it's our job to know everything about their life, everything about their healthcare and their history and all of those things. So we become very tightly intertwined with our patient. Not only do we see a lot more loss than anyone else in the healthcare setting, but we also get affected a little bit more than some of the other healthcare professions. And honestly, with everything that's been going on this last 2 years, with the uptick in the pandemic and all of that, we have seen a lot more loss. And so dealing with that has been kind of difficult. And I would say as a travel ICU nurse, working through as a crisis nurse, I feel like I've seen a huge amount of loss in the last 2 years. You stack on top of that the fact that I have lost 3 family members in the last 7 months. I think dealing with loss is something that we just don't really talk about enough, and they don't really prepare you enough for that in nursing school. I don't really remember them even really talking about it at all in nursing school. So I think that's very interesting as well, that they don't even go over that at all in nursing school. If they talked about that with you guys in your nursing school, definitely comment below. I'd like to hear, your take on it, your perspective, and what they did teach you guys in nursing school. I really just remember maybe our instructor just saying like, yeah, loss is hard. It's just something you get through. I don't really remember them actually teaching you about it, about grieving, about dealing with the whole process of it. I think it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. It definitely needs to be added into the nursing curriculum and talked about, because it's something that you are just not prepared for as a new nurse, or even as you move up in the ranks, like how to deal with that. So let's start the conversation off by talking about how the heck do we deal with loss as healthcare professionals. I think the very first thing that's important is to have your own understanding. Everyone's understanding of death is different according to what your beliefs are. A lot of our beliefs are based off of our religion or our background or our upbringing. And so it's very important for you to kind of reflect on your own understanding of loss. And one thing I will say about starting to work as a nurse, especially a critical care nurse, it really made me question my own ideas of loss and what I want my last wishes to be. It's definitely a reality check of understanding that there are worse things than death. And I don't think that we talk about that enough as well as healthcare professionals. And After working in like long-term acute care, I definitely realized that probably within the first like 2 to 3 months, I saw enough patients who were stuck in this perpetual state of being alive but not really living. And that was a reality check for me, that there are worse things than dying, than leaving this earth. And just seeing so many patients that were connected to machines that were keeping them alive long term. Some of them because their families weren't able to physically let them go. Some of them because their families were not financially able to let them go. But either way, they were kind of just stuck there. There was no quality of life. There is no quality of life when you're stuck in a situation like that. And so I think as healthcare professionals, it's good for us to have our own understanding of what loss means and passing, and have our own peace about us, about what it means to pass on. And I think that helps a lot with the grieving process and with dealing with losing patients, especially if you work in like a critical care setting where you see a lot of loss. So next, I'd like to say there is no right or wrong way to mourn. And I think that when I was a new nurse, I felt awkward and I felt kind of like just kind of stupid sometimes, because I would feel like, why am I so emotionally moved by the loss of my patient or the loss of a patient that I had taken care of? And I felt torn because, in nursing, it's so normalized, and it's something that you almost grow numb to because you see it so often. So as a new nurse, I would look at my peers who were just completely unmoved and unbothered, and I would just feel like, man, am I overreacting? Am I doing too much? Why do I feel so emotionally compelled and moved by the loss of this patient, and my peers not so much so? So I almost I felt kind of weird about feeling, these emotions that would come with losing a patient. And then on top of that, I almost felt guilt feeling emotional because I would see their family members and I would see how moved their family was. And I'm like, I've only been a part of this person's life for, 5 days, 4 weeks, however long. And here's their family who's actually mourning their loss. And so I felt kind of like a guilt, like maybe I am doing too much. And so I felt like this weird, connection to grief, like maybe I don't have a right to grieve over this person's loss, or I don't have a right to feel emotionally compelled, when the honest to God truth is we are all moved differently by loss, and we are all connected emotionally to our patients. And some of us, we just feel a connection almost immediately to certain patients. It could be their story, or just we're connected to them in general because of their character and their personality, and we just connect with them. And so there is no right or wrong feeling when it comes to losing a patient. Just because you took care of them for 1 hour or a year, you can still feel a sadness with their loss, and you can still feel emotionally moved by their loss, either way. And so additionally, on top of that, there's no wrong way to emotionally express yourself after losing a patient as well. So if you do feel compelled to cry, or if you do feel like you need some time away, you can do that, and that's completely your right. It's important to feel those emotions. If you do feel any type of emotional movement, sadness or anger or frustration or whatever the case may be, it's important to feel those emotions because it's a part of grief. And sometimes as healthcare professionals, we don't really give ourselves that time, because a lot of times in that fast pace, especially in the acute setting, it's like, okay, your patient just died. You gotta, do all of the notifications, get that room cleaned out, and you're getting an admission within an hour. And that's the sad reality of how healthcare is right now. And so unfortunately, we are forced to kind of like put on this veil of, okay, I have to take care of business first. I have to take care of the situation. I have to push emotions back so that I can notify the family, so I can notify the provider, so I can go down this checklist of everything that I have to do that has to do with this patient's loss. And I don't really have time to feel the feels. And we are taught as nurses to compartmentalize things, and that's essentially what we do. And so unfortunately, if you do not feel the emotions of whatever it is that you need to feel to go through the grieving process, and you compartmentalize it and you put it on the back burner, it's still there. And we still have to face those facts. We still have to face those emotions. We still have to go through every single step of the grieving process, whether it is your patient or it is your family member, because it's gonna come back. And I'll give you guys an example. When I lost my grandfather, I talked about this in a previous video, but I had left Alaska, and while I was in Alaska, I was so busy being a healthcare professional and helping my family dealing with this situation, and I really didn't get to start the mourning process until I got back to Texas. And when I got here, I had to start work. I had been out of work for probably about a month and a half at this point. So I had to go back to work almost immediately. We got back to Texas on like Wednesday. I picked up a couple per diem shifts on I think I picked up Friday, and then I started my travel assignment on Monday. I really thought that I was just gonna work, catch up on everything, and that the grieving part was just gonna dissipate, I guess. But it came back to bite me in the ass, because I ended up taking care of a patient in the ICU who ended up having a heart attack. And it was during, I took care of him for like the span of 3-4 days in a row. And on the 4th day, he ended up passing. He had a massive heart attack. He was passing from the causes of the heart attack, right? This is like 4 days later. And so while this patient was coding, it hit me. The grief of this is why I just lost my grandfather. He just passed for the exact same reason, not even 3 weeks ago. And here I am dealing with a patient who's going through the same things or something similar. And so it hit me that I really hadn't processed the loss of my grandfather. I didn't grieve properly. I didn't go through the steps and through the emotions and allowing myself to feel the feels. I compartmentalized it. I pushed it to the back, and it came to bite me in the ass, because in that very moment when I had to be a healthcare professional, in the back of my mind, I'm screaming like, oh my God, I was not ready for this. I'm not prepared for this. Physically, my body kicked in, it was fight or flight, and my nursing experience, it all kicked in, and I was able to handle the situation professionally. But in the back of my mind, I was like, ooh, this is not a good situation. This is tough for me emotionally. It was rough. I was very blessed that the next couple of days after that, I had a stretch of 3 or 4 days off, because I had to sit down and process all of that. The loss of my grandfather, the loss of my patient, and it was rough. It was one of the worst codes I'd ever been in on top of all of that. So it was just a really tough situation to deal with. And so I think it's very important as healthcare professionals that we address our emotions, we address our feelings, and don't put them on the back burner. Don't try and ignore them, because they're not going anywhere. They're still going to be right there waiting for you patiently. So whether you handle them right now, or you handle them in the middle of a messed up situation, or a stressful situation down the road, you're still going to have to handle them. The next important thing to understand is that grief is not linear. Before all of the situations that I've dealt with in the last 2 years, I always felt like, you hear about the stages of grief, and you just go through them one step at a time, and slowly but surely you start to get better, and things start to get better, and that's just what grief looked like. But I had never dealt with this much loss, and I never dealt with things that were this close to me. As a nurse in the past, before the pandemic, I had seen like a patient loss here, one there, one here, one there, but never in like a mass amount, never so close together, not so often. It takes a toll on you. It really does. So you would think that the process would be really simple and that you go through your steps of grief, but that's just not how it works. There are going to be days when you have highs and days when you have lows. There are going to be days when you remember that person and it just pulls on your heartstrings and you may feel like emotionally overwhelmed where you cry. I would say it's the same sometimes for dealing with the loss of my family members. I have good days and sometimes I have bad days. I think that it's very important to know that and to just feel those emotions when you do have them. Allow yourself to be human. Allow yourself to cry or to take a moment to remember that person and allow yourself to have those emotions, because it's natural for us to feel those emotions, and it's also natural to have the highs and the lows when you are remembering someone. I had one patient that I lost in the height of COVID, and she looked identical to an old ICU director that I had on a previous travel assignment. And her story was just so sad and so compelling. And we had children around the same age, and I just felt a connection with her. And so when she ended up passing, like 2-3 weeks later, it was really random. My same director that she looked just like had messaged me and was like, "Hey, how are you doing on your new assignment? I just want you to know I was thinking about you." And I immediately broke down when I got that text message from her. I broke down in my Airbnb kitchen and just started bawling my eyes out, because it just reminded me so much of, once again, that patient. It's okay. It's okay to feel all of that, and to understand that there are days that you're going to have highs and days that you're going to have lows, and that's completely okay too, and that's completely normal. Grief is just, it's not linear. It is a little bit of a roller coaster until you get to the other side of it. One of the last topics I want to go over with you guys is finding healthy outlets. Everyone kind of deals with the stresses and the highs and lows of working as a nurse and dealing with loss in different ways. I would say that I've had an array of outlets, some healthy, some unhealthy. And so I think it's very important, if you are a new nurse, to look at some of your coping mechanisms that you currently have and make sure that you have established good, healthy coping mechanisms before you even go into nursing. Have your go-to things that you enjoy doing that are healthy outlets, spending time with family, traveling, journaling, working out, walking your dog, whatever it is that you enjoy doing. Make sure that you make a list of those and keep them close to you, physically and mentally, because there are going to be so many highs and lows that come with nursing in general, and losing a patient is definitely one of the lowest lows. And so when you have those moments happen, you don't really anticipate them, and you can't always anticipate how you're going to react. But if you know that you have your healthy coping mechanisms already lined up, it's easier for you to go to a list that's already pre-made than for you to really think while you're in a moment of a low and a sad time, like, what should I do to cope? Like, at this point, your body is already kind of going through a lot, and you may even be dealing with a little bit of like emotional and physical like shock that comes with that. So to already have your positive and healthy coping mechanisms lined up in advance for you really sets the tone and really allows you to just have those go-to things already set up. Some of the examples that I guess I would give you would be, once again, working out. Spending time with loved ones is a huge one, because it's just a reminder of like almost like a grounding thing. It brings you back to your reality and your happiness of enjoying life when you are around people who love you and that you love. It just gives you the reminder of who you are and a healthy setting to be in, where you're kind of grounded all over again. For me, the things that my positive, healthy coping mechanisms are spending time with my family. I enjoy working out. Of course, I love traveling. You can't always do that so much, but mostly just spending time with my family and talking. Like I love to talk. I love to talk through my emotions sometimes. And so the two things that I've set up as my go-to people that I can talk to, that I can vent to. For me, I'm very blessed that my best friend is also a nurse. And so when I talk to her about my nursing woes and my stressors and things like that, it feels almost natural because I know that she's not judging me for how I feel. She's very open-minded. And she understands because she's gone through it as well. And even when we worked together, or even if we worked in different hospitals and different healthcare settings, she gets it, and because she's gone through it. So it's great to have people that you can talk to that are in the same line of work as you. So other nurses that you can talk to and bounce ideas off of, as well as having maybe a go-to person who may not be in healthcare, but understands loss, who is just understanding and able to talk to you and is available. Another great thing I would recommend, counseling. Having a counselor or a mental health professional that you can talk to is always going to be a great go-to resource because they can help you kind of work through the issues. Once again, it's a non-judgmental ear to listen to what you're going through and to give you sound advice. Additionally, if you don't have healthy coping mechanisms, that's something that they can help you work through, help you kind of look at some different ideas and concepts and ways to work through grief and how to establish healthy coping mechanisms for yourself. Once again, you can always look up online about grieving and about loss and things like that, and look at what healthy coping mechanisms and things that you can find online. But to have a healthcare professional that can walk with you and talk with you through the process, has soundproof ideas that have worked for other people that you can try out and that are kind of like plug and play, as well as additional resources that you can use, that's always going to be a great go-to. Technology is such a blessing nowadays because now we are able to access help from licensed professionals at the tip of our fingers through our cell phones and through our computers. And I would kind of urge you guys to do the same. If you are interested, if you are financially able to, this is a great resource for you to jump online and be able to have access to someone to talk to. One of the resources that I started using at the height of the pandemic was BetterHelp. And no, this video is not sponsored, but I would love to work with them if you're watching, because working as a healthcare professional right now is stressful. And to be honest, the last 2 years have been really stressful. And I don't know that there's like an immediate answer to a lot of things that we've been dealing with. As healthcare professionals, I don't know that the stressors of it are going to dissipate anytime soon. So once again, I think that having good coping mechanisms, healthy coping mechanisms, having a support system to have someone to talk to, and being able to kind of work through the issues both on your own and with the help of your support system is so important, because we're just dealing with a lot right now. There's a lot to deal with. And like I said, they're not gonna, these issues are not gonna dissipate overnight. So it's just imperative for you to have all of those things in place and having a system that works for you. Thanks for watching, you guys. I hope that this video was helpful. Once again, I will link down below any resources that I have available, anything that I find. If you yourself have any resources that you've been using online, or even any healthy coping mechanisms that you'd like to share, I would love to hear from you down below. And I'd love to hear kind of how you guys have been getting through some of the recent issues, and on top of that, dealing with grief and the loss of loved ones or patients as well as a healthcare professional. So thanks again for watching, you guys. Take care.